So I know we're a little bit behind today, so I'm going to just jump into this one. This is your last section. We're on session 3 on page 8 of your booklets there. Distractions, difficulties, and dangers. So just going to bring all these things to a conclusion. And we mentioned in session 1 that home education would refine you as a parent. It was one of the first things I said. Parenting is a refining furnace that God takes you through to strip all the things away from you and make you more like Him. Home education will refine you because it's difficult. And as a parent of your child, but now also teacher of your child, those things you're constantly facing distractions, you're constantly facing pressures, difficulties arise. So much information is trying to find its way into the minds and hearts of your kids. So much information. And you have to remember that as you want to be the greatest influence in the minds and hearts of your kids, so you do want to monitor the information that's going in to the kids. And so early on, we recognized, we had cable TV, because that's what you did. You had cable TV. And we recognized early on that my son started wanting certain toys and things. He was constantly asking about these things, and we recognized he was getting it from the adverts. Oh, this new toy. We said, why are we piping this into our home? We're just teaching our kids to want stuff. And we got rid of TV. We actually haven't had it since. We have a television, but we haven't had cable. We monitor what comes into our home because we're monitoring the information. So don't take lightly what is shaping the mind and heart of your child. All that information that's piping it is coming from everywhere in the world, and you want to know what that is. So this is largely talking about some of those things. But just listen, even with all these things, stay committed. Just expect these things. Be prepared. But always keep the big picture, like Jody was talking about. Come back to that mission statement. Remember, days are going to be difficult. You're going to come back and say, why am I doing this? Oh, that's right. The Lord has called my family to this. If the Lord's called you to it, then He's given you everything you need for life and godliness, and so you will succeed. So, on that note, let's look at distractions. I just broadly gave you a couple, and just blanks, so that you could just write things in as you find it helpful. But external distractions. So you got to remember that distractions are going to come because Satan doesn't want you to succeed. You've chosen to remove your kids from the satanically energized world, and it is, right? We have to remember it's in the hands of the evil one, and so you've chosen to remove them. He doesn't want you to succeed, so distractions are going to come. And Jody reminded me of a illustration of, because she was easily distracted in those early days. Sometimes she'd come down and say, "Okay, kids, it's ready for school," and they would just be shocked, like, "School? What do you mean? What do you mean we're doing school?" As if they haven't done school ever. But because the last few days were so hectic, or she was distracted and it didn't seem like school was happening, they thought, we thought we were off the hook. What's going on? It's like, no, come back in. We're doing this. But there's a lot of external distractions. She mentioned technology today and phones and things that are constantly coming in. But even the household chores, the things, moms, you're busy. There's so much going on in your house. You have to remember that you've chosen to prioritize school, and so those things can wait. And husbands, you're going to have to just pitch in on those things, okay? That's part of the thing that's become our family thing is that when my wife is the primary one making the meal, preparing the meal, all of our kids know, they all know, and we know that she made the meal. We're all doing the cleanup. She's going to go sit down. We're going to clean up. Part of that is I just want our kids to learn to serve in our family, but also recognizing she's doing all this schooling stuff. We've got to take loads off. We've got to help each other make this work, and it's just become a great thing. And I think you've got to just remember that because there's still life that goes on, still laundry that needs to be folded and those kind of things. Husbands, you're going to have to step in and help with those things. But when schooling has happened, it's okay to put those things aside for when you're doing the school. But as you heard, when they're young, it doesn't take very long. You're done in an hour or two because they've had focused attention and time from you, which they don't get at the school. They've got lots of kids. They're moving from point A to point B, and a lot of time is actually wasted. And a lot of time is not being used fully. So you have that opportunity. Now, we're both in full-time ministry. My wife, I'm a pastor, and so she's automatically head of the women's ministry. That's how it kind of works. And so she's always getting phone calls, all these things. So she has to determine, is this something I need to pick up right now or not? So is this an emergency? Is this something I can answer later? just make sure you prioritize that school is happening first. One of those external distractions will be what other families are doing. And your kids will note that because they'll recognize they're doing something different than the neighbor down the street or this person or that person. And they'll start to bring those things to you and say, well, so-and-so does this, or that family does this, and that family does this. And that's right. You can say, yeah, they do that. But our family has decided to do this. Now, you don't need to make a judgment on that other family in front of your little one right then, like, oh, but that family is sinful, right? They don't love the Lord. They're mean people. No, you don't do that. But you say, but our family has decided to do this. Why? Because God has called our family to do these things. And we what? We want to obey God, right? Do you see that? So you as a parent are being obedient to God, and then you want your children to be obedient to them as well. So don't let those things start to even distract you. Like, oh yeah, why are those families things? Because you will start to create doubt. So beware of all the external distractions that are going to come, and prioritize school above those things. We order so much on Amazon and things like that these days. So the doorbell's always going off. I'm like, what's coming through Amazon now? Wait, what is it? That it's every 2 seconds. But just minimize those distractions if you can for that school time. What about internal distractions? Well, one of the primary ones would be younger siblings. You got little babies in here, and you're going to try to, maybe you've got these little ones, and you're trying to homeschool 3-year-olds. Oh, there's all these distractions. They need your attention, and they need your attention. So how do you do this? One of the things that Jody did was, for the younger ones, only for those school days, she had a special box of toys that she brought down out of the attic that only magically appeared right on those school days. So that younger one knew, like, oh, this is a special time for me. You didn't keep it out. When school was done, pack it up, and it went away. So that was just special for that time. Great little idea. It may not work for all the kids. I don't even think it worked for all of ours. But you have something there that just keeps that little one focused, something they can play with, something they can focus on that's only for them while the other ones are doing their school. Or, as I said, a lot of things can include all the family. Now, when they're really little, like they are here, like crawling around here, they're not following. They're not following what you're doing. They're not listening to what you're reading. So those can be trickier times. So maybe look at your schedule. Can you schedule some of that school during the nap time of your little one when you set them down? Could you organize your day in such a way that kind of works around that? You just might have to be more flexible with your school time and how you want to do that when you have younger ones. And just remember this, and Jody's mentioned that, you have seasons of life, don't you? You have seasons of life. So maybe it's a season where you have a child, okay, they're going to take this attention, they're going to take time, but listen, God fills in the gaps. He's not taken by surprise. He's not going, oh, I called this family to whole school, but now there's a baby. Oh, no. He knows. He knows. So he's going to fill those things in. It's okay. You're not failing your children. You're going to constantly fight that. I'm failing them. They're not going to, they'll be just, they'll know, won't be able to add, they won't be able to read, they won't be able to write. That won't be true. Just focus on the time that you do have with them. Do your best to prioritize. The Lord will get you through those seasons of time. And as best as you can, minimize the internal distractions there. Beware of the false goals that will come to you as well. Completing every little bit of curriculum. I can probably be more like that than Jody. I love to fill in the blanks, as you saw in the first session, right? I get little blanks, And if there's one missing, what's the word? Put it on the screen. I got to know. I could be more like that. Listen, you don't have to complete every jot and tittle of the curriculum. It's not about getting through it all. It's about character building and also creating a desire to learn. So sometimes you may go, that's enough for today. We went as far as we could. I'm just going to put it aside. If you're just cramming it all in because you're just trying to get through it, then you're not creating a healthy learning environment. It's okay to let some things go for a day or two, pick them up later. That's one of the joys of homeschooling. You can do it at your own pace. Do it in your own time. They're not falling behind. Like Jody said, things come back around. And so maybe you didn't get to all those points, but it'll come back around later. It's okay. But let's look at some difficulties. And one of the things that mentioned earlier were learning difficulties. And those are real things. And there's real challenges that come with learning difficulties. You have dyslexia. You have ADHD. You have dyscalculia, which is struggling with math. Dysgraphia, struggling with writing. Dyspraxia, motor skills, things like that. Our child had dyslexia. And we really struggled with that because we just thought, we're trying to have that balance of, okay, he's not quite ready here. But as he got older and older, we started realizing he's really not getting this. And so what do you do when a child's 8, 9, 10, and they're not reading well yet? Well, we ended up having to take him to a specialist and have him look at what was the deal. And he came out and said, yeah, he has dyslexia, but it's severe dyslexia. And so we were so like, oh, this is so discouraged. But he said, but I don't want you to be discouraged. I want you to come in and sit with me. I said, okay. The guy had me come in and sit with him. I want you to see the questions I'm asking. So he started asking these questions. My son was answering questions I didn't know the answers to. like, are you here to make me feel stupid? Is that what this is about? Because he's like, your son is a very intelligent learner. And we have been reading aloud, hadn't we? We've been doing all these read alouds, so he was auditorily learning all these things really well. But what he wasn't able to do was write well on his own and read well on his own. So he'd fallen behind in that area, but he wanted to encourage me to say, but your son's very intelligent. It has nothing to do with that. But he has learning disabilities. Well, the Lord was so gracious that he provided a woman in our own church who happened to be a specialist with dyslexic people. She had a whole curriculum, a Barton is what it's called. And she offered to do that with him, to tutor him and take him through it. So she's going to scrap everything. We're starting from scratch under this new system of learning. And then later on, my wife took that over. We were given the curriculum, and she took that over. And he was able to get through that time. And he began reading novels on his own after a time. So you can overcome learning difficulties. It is good to identify those if you are sure it is actually a learning difficulty. I think sometimes we're too quick to go and label something because we want to kind of make an excuse like, okay, good, no, it's not me. But we got to be careful to make sure it really actually is something that is hindering their learning ability. And then there are ways to fix that, ways to get help, and the Lord will provide that for you. We even put Ryan, my son's name was Ryan, in a Christian school during just grade 1 for a year because he had that learning difficulty. He also needed greater structure than we were getting at home with the other kids in homeschooling. And so that was the best way to teach him. We just did that for 1 year to kind of wrangle that in, and it was a one-on-one thing that was going on with the teacher as well. So it was really helpful for him to kind of get him into that. And then he came back home with us and joined us again. So sometimes you might need to make a little bit of a detour with one because there's a particular issue, and that's okay. Work through those difficulties because they're real, of course. But the home is the best place to foster a child's unique education needs. They don't necessarily get that in the school because they won't be catered to, certainly. But that's another life in the world, isn't it? That everyone learns the same way, and we're going to teach the same way, and that's just not true. We all learn in different ways. We're created uniquely. And so most people with learning difficulties also have heightened gifts outside of academia. And so you might want to take that opportunity to focus on those gifts for that child that the school wouldn't do. So look at it as a positive thing as well. You also want to teach them to cope with those challenges. You're not a victim there. Remember, God made you the way he made you for a reason. So we had to tell him, listen, Ryan, you're just going to have to work harder at these things than someone else will, might. That's just part of working through this. And he had to accept that. So learning difficulties are real, and if you're looking at that, it's okay to get them, tested. We tried early on. We put them in a preschool, and I bit the teacher and hid under the table, and I was like, this is not going to work at all. So we recognize he's got some different things that we need to work through. What about distractible kids? Kids that just can't, squirrel, right? What about those kids? Because there are practical tools for helping kids that are easily distracted as well. Playing with Legos, like Jody mentioned, or something tactile that they can do while, say, a read aloud is going on. Even as a children's pastor, I recognize that not every kid could sit still while I did all the talking. I had to recognize those ones that needed the movement. They were allowed to be back and behind the room so they weren't a distraction to others, and they were allowed to do their swaying and things. That's okay. They need to do that. My son Ryan needed to be mobile. He would do laps around us as I read aloud. I would get dizzy. I mean, stop doing that. But he had also sensory things, so he needed movement. He needed hard physical touch. And so for him to be able to learn and absorb things, we needed to provide that. He needed more information. Does that make sense? So yeah, move around, get on your toes, do those things, and then he could take in what was coming. Did we still make him sit down and write and do those things when he needed to? Yes, we did. But he wouldn't be able to do it to the same extent the others could do. So you can be flexible with those distractible kids and work on the skills for the sitting. You know, you give them a limit. I need you to do it for 5 minutes, right? Even if they're sitting there going, 5 minutes, right? Give them that, and then let them stand after that, and you slowly kind of work on that, and that time will extend. Ryan needed heavy lifting. That's what we gave him to do. So we had heavy things around the house, and we made it like a real chore. Oh, Ryan, I need you to take that upstairs. Okay, and he'd go grab this heavy thing, and he'd go upstairs and put it in the room. Had no need for that thing to be up there. The whole purpose was for Ryan to get that physical thing out, right? He'd go do that. You have anything else for me to do? Oh, yeah, I need you to go bring that back down, right? Go back up there and bring it back down. But for him, it was fun, you know? And you can do those even in between subjects. Give them chores to do so that they get that physical thing out. If they're those kind of distractible ones or movable things, that's the great thing about homeschool. You can be flexible, and these difficulties are real. They do happen. So you just don't want you to be caught off guard and say, oh, okay, I've got this kind of kid. Well, I guess I can't homeschool. No, you absolutely can. In fact, that's even a better place for them. You just have to find the way through it, okay? What about fatigue or burnout? Were you going to get tired of this? Yeah, you were going to wake up some days going, oh, why am I doing this? You're going to get tired. Burned out, of course. It's okay to take breaks. Sometimes you might just need that. Make a quiet time for yourself. In fact, I'm going to talk to moms for a minute. Make sure you have that time. I remember one of the ladies at the conventions we would go to would tell her kids that she had have a prayer time with God, and she would pull her skirt up over her head, and she would pray. So it would, not that she had another layer there, okay? But when the kids came and saw that, like, oh, they knew, okay, mom's having the time. And she would pray and have some time with the Lord. But honestly, go take the quiet time and say, okay, kids, I need you to do this. I'm going to take a little quiet time. I'm going to take a little nap. Whatever you need to do, it's okay, because you need to restore yourself. But make sure that you are taking the time with the Lord. Read the Bible, pray. All those things need to happen. And then teach your kids to have that quiet time as well. You want to make sure that they're learning that. One of the things early on we were trying to do was I wanted to be up before the kids were up, and I wanted to be reading my Bible. So then when they got up, they saw Dad reading their Bible, and they knew that it was a priority for Dad to have quiet time with the Lord. And each of my kids now have done that on their own when they got to that age where they could do it. So I've had times in the morning with my daughter coming up and sit next to me to read her Bible. And now I've got times in the morning with my son coming and sitting next to me to read his Bible, because we know that that's a priority, and it's one of the things that we want them to start to follow us in. So ladies, you know, do start that, because your kids will see, oh, there's going to be a time where I'll be ready to do that as well. It's okay to start later as well. Maybe you're just not able to get up as early with, you know, mom fatigue and those kind of things, and you need to move it. Be flexible with that. It's okay. You can start and finish at a later time. Just do whatever suits you best. So you're going to have those times where you're just going to want to be done. Burnout is a real thing. Or maybe you'll feel like you've gotten to a point where you're just so off and it's not working. As Jody said, it's okay to stop and just do something different if it's not working. Many times we've come to the kids and said, hey, listen, we really got off to a bad start, or we haven't done this right, or we're going to come back to this now because we really let this go. And that's really good to do with your kids, because one, you're actually showing them that you're not perfect. We've actually apologized to our kids and said, hey, you know, we really dropped the ball in this area. And particularly, I'll tell you where we've apologized the most is in areas of discipline. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we said, you know, we really haven't cracked down on these things, so it's actually our fault. It's not your fault. What we're seeing is a result of our own lack. So we're going to, and we re-communicate what we're going to start doing. We're going to get back to this. And when this doesn't happen, this is where we're going. And so they know, okay, mom and dad are serious about this again. But we've also shown them that we're humble, right? We don't know it all, and we're not perfect. But we will refocus, get back on track. Remember the big picture. Keep that big picture in mind. You're not just trying to get through education. You're shaping character, you're pointing them to the Lord, and you're doing that together as a family. I think you also want to pray for the ability to discern between what is a learning difficulty and what is an incapability and what is disobedience, okay? Because a lot of times it's disobedient kids that we have, and we've got to discern through that and attack that little area. And I think that really comes down to those rebellious attitudes that you can see in your little ones there. And when you do see that, that's certainly one of the big difficulties you're going to come across. They're going to be like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not fun. This is not whatever. Rebellious attitudes you want to deal with right away, immediately. You do not want to let those go. And what I mean right away, I mean in that moment. I don't mean, oh, okay. Now maybe you're a mom at home and you got all the kids and say, you can say, okay, when your dad comes home, okay, that's all right. But do address it then. That they understand that moment, that attitude was a rebellious attitude. So what I mean by a rebellious attitude, it is challenging your authority, okay? They need to accept your authority as a child because you want to teach them to be obedient. In fact, obedience is what you're pointing them to the Lord, right? I want them to obey the Lord, fear God, obey His commands. So that starts with you because remember, you have representative authority God has given you. You're giving them the invisible, right? The invisible authority of God is making visible in their lives. So this starts with when you're addressing these obedience issues and there's not obedient, willing submission from your child. What is rejection of authority? A couple of things. So challenging your authority, okay? You have that. If you've said something and they flat out just say, no, I don't want to do that. Well, obviously that's rebellion. But another one is a delayed response to authority. So if they're delaying obedience, that's still disobedience, isn't it? And I was talking to, who was I? Oh, it was Alan, I think. We were talking about that. And that's a common thing as well, in that we have been trained from society that there's a thing in parenting called a 3 count or a 5 count. It's not biblical. I don't know where it comes from. We learn it and we go, oh, it must work. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. You want to challenge those things, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. If you're excusing rebellion, if they're excusing their rebellion as something else, or if they're submitting to you, but they're doing it without honor, right? I said I need you to go clean your room. Oh. And they stomp, and you hear every step all the way up to the right. They're stomping. They've obeyed you, but they've done it without honor. They've done it with a disrespectful attitude. That is still rebelling against your authority. So even those things you don't want to let slip. Why? Because there's something in the heart, isn't there? There's still a heart issue. So if you let that go, oh, at least they clean their room. That doesn't matter. It was never about the clean room. It was about the heart. So you want to address the heart. Now I'm going to read a passage to you that tells us exactly why we want our children to obey. It's Ephesians 6. You'll know this well. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Now, according to that scripture, it's very simple. Why do we want our children to obey? Because it's right. That's what it says. Because it's right. The way to a child's heart is to teach them, to train them, to discipline them to obey, because it's right, not to escape punishment. Okay? Not to escape punishment. You do this, or you're getting this. That's just teaching them to escape punishment. You do this because God's commanded you to do this. You do this because I've asked you to do this, because it's right for you to obey your parents. They don't need anything else beyond that. That is asking them to obey you. In fact, I have a definition there for you. What is obedience? The act of your child doing what you tell them to do, even when they do not want to do it. Even they do want. Now, again, we're going to address the heart if there's a rebellious attitude in the heart. But they must do exactly what you ask them to do when you ask them to do it, if it's possible for them to do it. So anytime your child knows what you've told them to do, so you've said it clearly, so that it's not possible for them to be confused about that. If they choose not to do it, that is disobedience. And so, looking at those things we mentioned earlier, the challenge to authority, that's obviously direct disobedience. They're clearly just defying your command. That's got to be dealt with right away. And I remember one of the first things we saw when we moved here was just, we came to help get the children's ministry started in our church. And I walked in the first day, and there were kids up on the table. One was picking up a chair, getting ready to throw it at the teacher. And I thought, what has happened here? What is going on? So we just came in with these things and listen, you obviously don't have any authority. That's what it was. Teachers had no authority in the eyes of the kids. And so what we gave them authority. said, here's the authority. You take God's word to bear. Here's our rules. Here's the things we want you to do. But kids don't need a long list of rules. Welcome to Sunday school. Here are my 10 commandments. Right? We just had 3. Just 3 things they had to do, and that was it. And we reiterated those every single day. And within a month, everyone was sitting quietly, everyone was learning, and it was a productive and healthy environment. And that's just because the teachers felt empowered. They felt like they had authority. Well, listen, parents, you have authority. God's given it to you, all right? So it's very, very simple. So when they challenge your authority, they have defied you. That is rebellion. That delayed response to authority, that is this. Delayed obedience is still disobedience, because when that first instruction is not followed, what your child is basically saying is that they want to maintain some form of control. They're saying, well, I'm going to do it, but I'll do it when I want to do it. No, that's not okay. And so you have to get them to respond when you tell them to do it. They need to do it when you tell them to do it. So the child's wrong if they disobey on that first directive. I need you to go clean your room, and they don't go do it. They're wrong. But if you go, I need you to go clean your room, and they don't do it, you go, 1, 2, 3. Well, now you're wrong. The parent is wrong because you are training your child to disobey you on the first directive. And guess what? It's just as easy to train them to obey on the first command as it is on the 3rd or 4th or 5th. You understand? It really is. And I don't have time to go into it today, especially since we're behind. But when it talks about teaching and training your child, you really do have to train them. And I often give the illustration, I know it looks terrible, but when you talk to your little ones, you go over here, come here, and you get down to their level, you look them in the eye, and say, I need you to go over there and get that ball and bring it back to me, right? And they go and they bring it back to you and you get it, all right, great, good job. Now, go back and do it again, right? What's it kind of look like? It's like I'm training a dog, right? Go fetch. Yeah, go fetch, good boy, right? But we train a dog, is my point. You have to train a child. You actually have to teach them. They don't know how to do this. They don't know how to obey. That's what I want you to do. So every time when I ask you to do something, that's exactly what I want you to do. That's excellent. The first time I ask you. It takes training. And in those first years, you're doing this all the time, okay? All the time. So you got to train them to obey you on your first directive. Otherwise, yeah, you're in the middle of, Tesco, and you're in there going, 1, 2, 3, and they're still running off down, giggling and laughing. So don't let them do that. They also have to respect you with that attitude, and that was, we often said you had to have a happy heart. That was our phrase, all right? But it's submission with honor. So they must submit to you, but they must have a happy heart. So if they didn't, we'd come back and say, no, that wasn't a happy heart. So we'd have them sit and think about that, get their heart right. Often that was our phrase, go get your heart right with the Lord. You need to get your heart right. The heart is wrong right now because it's not joyful. You're not doing it with a happy heart. And until we saw that happy heart, then they still were in rebellion. So you want to train them to have that happy heart and be consistent. So this means do that all the time. If you do that one day, but then not the next day, or the father's doing it, but not the mother, you're getting nowhere. You're spinning your heels. So you got to be consistent on these things. I'm addressing this in this section because we're talking about training. We're talking about the difficulties you're going to have, and you are going to have major difficulties if you have not addressed these issues in those younger years. So while you're homeschooling, a big part of what you're doing in that 0 to 4 or 5 range is establishing your authority, and it takes training. You really have to train them to obey you and what that looks like. And we're going to talk in a minute about being concrete on those types of things. So number 2 says set clear boundaries. So you want to make the instruction clear and measurable, make it reasonable for the child's age and abilities. So certainly you're doing that with school. Whatever instruction you're giving them, if they, you want to give them something that you're confident that they can do. Because why? You want them to succeed, don't you? You're the parent, you want them to succeed. And the younger they are, the more specific the rules need to be. And this even comes in how we correct things. We go, quiet down. Well, that is, if I told you guys to quiet down, that's so abstract. What's quiet down? Is this quiet? Is this quiet? Is this quiet? What's quiet? I don't even know what quiet is. We do that all the time. We just say things, and it's so abstract. It's not concrete. You have to show them. You have to train them. This is what that looks like. This is what that sounds like. This is what that needs to be. So it has to be very, very specific. Use physical touch and use eye contact. You can't shout something for the room and hope that they've picked it up. And then punish them when they didn't. That's really your own fault. You have to bring them in, give them eye contact. We definitely had to do that because I had to make sure, did you hear me? Are you there? you know, because they're spacey sometimes, aren't they? They're distractible kids. You got to make sure you understand what I'm saying, get a nod back, okay. And a lot of times those early years, we were given the chores, they were like missions. All right, here's your mission. All right, I want you to go up. I want you to pick up all those socks I saw on the floor. All right, all those socks. Pick them up, put them in that big hamper, and then fly back down to me, tell me, mission accomplished, sir, right? And make it fun. And they come down and say, okay, I'm going to go up. I'm the general. I'm going to inspect your work, you know. And I kind of made it fun to go up there. Oh, you missed a sock. And then I'd beat them. No, I know. But I kind of make it fun, but I also was trying to teach them and train them. You know, these are the specific things I'm looking for. So hopefully that helps set clear directions, but also clear boundaries. And when you give clear boundaries, that or if they're not clear, you're going to make an insecure child. Is dad going to explode at me if I do this? Are they mad? Are they happy? Make them very, very clear, and then they're going to be secure. But if you don't make clear boundaries, then they'll begin to get insecure, and that leads down a bad path. Insecurity breeds lack of trust breeds disrespect, disrespect breeds disobedience, and disobedience leads to rebellion. So you don't want to go that direction, because the Bible says that leads to death. So another point here is poor planning, okay? When it comes to parenting, poor planning on your part shouldn't be a crisis for your child, you know. So, for example, you know, you've planned to do something and it's gone longer. Oh, maybe like today, and so kids are going to only last so long, right? And they're getting a little fidgety, and now you're getting mad at them. Well, listen, that's not their fault. You have to make sure you're doing your best to plan these things, and then when things like this happen, be flexible. Be flexible with them. If they're in the middle also of an approved activity, something they're allowed to do, hey, you said you go have 15 minutes playing this. Is there any reason they couldn't finish that, you know, before they complete this instruction, you know? So sometimes you got to check, are we just being unruly as well? You know, can I get this done this second? Does it need to be done this second? So how about after you finish that, okay, that's almost done. When that last block goes there, then I need you to come see me. I have an instruction for you. But do anticipate that they're going to challenge your boundaries. They're sinful little guys and girls, and you have to expect that. And then determine what those boundaries will be before the next stage in their life, before you get there. So that means a lot of communication between husband and wife, okay? Make sure how you're going to deal with each of these things. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Again, be specific, be concrete, be realistic. And on that, I have parent tools that you need to avoid. I see these all the time, particularly here in Great Britain. But these are tools that you have in your bag to use, that you use, and they have no power at all to do anything to change the heart of your child, yet we use them anyway. First one, don't threaten. Okay, that's a power tool. It's a power tool we use, and it has zero ability to change your child's heart, to threaten them. Empty threats. You're at Disneyland. It's cost you 5,000 pounds to fly there and go there as a family, and they're unruly like, if you do that one more time, we're leaving Disneyland. Well, your child knows full well you're not leaving Disneyland. You pay far too much money to go there. Now, that's a big extreme thing. But we do it all the time, don't we? We make these threats, and we give them options that we can't actually fulfill, or exercise. So don't make empty kind of threats. Threats don't do anything to change your child's heart. Don't manipulate. That's a huge one here. Many times we manipulate our children to obeying while we ignore or excuse the rebellion that just took place. So if you do that, you just reach into your parent power tool bag for a non-heart changing tool, and that only feeds selfish desire. All right, don't manipulate. Okay, how about this? I'll give you some ice cream if you stop screaming, or you stop doing that, or stop doing that. Sometimes kids do get to that point where they're screaming and yelling. And what do? Jody, all the time, had to just take them somewhere like this room, put them in there, and quiet time until they screaming and yelling. They have to get control. So you said it all the time. You need to go get control, because sometimes they get to that point and they're just out of control. Take them someplace where they can get control of themselves. You're teaching them to self-control. Get control, and then you can talk, and then you can address the rebellion that just took place. But certainly don't manipulate them. Here's some candy. Here's this. This will help you. Another form of manipulation is yelling. A lot of times we just yell because we don't get the obedient response we're looking for. And particularly dads can do this. We yell, scream, use our voice And that's a manipulation, and that doesn't change a heart either. So don't manipulate. And the last one is don't use guilt. That's just trying to shame your child into obeying you, and that will only breed discontent. Saying things like, I remember when we were happy, it was before we had kids, just horrible things. That kid's obeying. That kid's so nice. Why aren't you? Things that will shame them and guilt them, that will not change their heart at all. So make your training and discipline reasonable. And the last thing is encourage every time you can, all right? Encouragement goes a lot further, works way better long term than punishment does, just like love works better than guilt, okay? So do encourage them. Don't get into these things where you're threatened, manipulate, guilt. And this is particularly difficulties you're going to have when you're schooling and you have the schedule in your mind and you're trying to get through. Remember, put that aside for a second. It's a heart that you need to shape. The heart is more important. But don't go to these things. They don't have any ability to change the heart at all. I see it all the time. A lot of times we blame the kids. I was walking through the halls of a hospital and there was a kid on the ground flailing around everywhere, and the mom was standing there almost announcing to everyone else, I can't believe I have a child as disobedient as you. Look at you, I just can't believe, almost to say like, well, not my fault. I know. In fact, I would tell everybody, this is the worst kid on the planet. I can't believe it. First of all, I couldn't believe the shame and guilt that was being heaped upon that kid. But also, just taking all the responsibility off herself. Not my fault, not my fault. So you have to recognize, listen, they're under our authority, and we are trying to shape a heart there. And every time we have some issue, we've got to address that. It's a lot of work in those early years, okay? Last thing, and we'll look at these dangers, okay? There are many things you've got to be especially aware of, and I just put 3 here today. Comparing. Don't let yourself fall into that trap at all, all right? You're gonna have enough battling as you have it as it is, but kids learn at different speeds. Kids have different learning styles, and no one knows them better than you do. But what you cannot do is fall into the trap of comparing them to other kids or what other families are doing. Like I mentioned earlier, well, this family's doing that. They're going to be learning at their own style. You know them. Just keep going, okay? Don't compare. Don't do that. And remember, even if kids in the school system academically looks like they're going further, you are shaping character. They're not necessarily getting that there. All right, that's more important, and that you will see. Doubt. Don't listen to others who are questioning your teaching capability. Don't or the progress of your kids. Even well-intentioned family members. Maybe you have those who are thinking, "What are you doing?" They've never heard of this homeschool thing before, and they think you're just bonkers doing it. They can say things that even can give you second thoughts. You already have doubts. You're already going to be struggling. You don't need them from family members. So don't let the questions of others add to those fears and doubts. Don't let that happen. Early on we were making drastic choices. It just didn't seem like it made sense to my parents. And so even animated movies, we were very intentional to make sure we knew what was in movies, because look at today. Can you just put your kid in front of any cartoon? Absolutely not. You can't. You got to know what's in it. But my parents didn't realize that, and so we would, when they would watch the kids, I would say, "Oh, I know that movie's out, but can you not take them to that?" And they're like, "What's a cartoon?" That was there. "What's a cartoon?" "I know it's a cartoon, but I looked it up on Plugged In, and it has this." And now you're going to have LGBTQ plus stuff in these things, so you certainly can't do it. And they're going to judge you on that. They're going to say, "What are you doing?" They're going to do the same thing with your homeschool choices. Remember, you're making sure you're watching what is going into the shaping of the hearts and minds of your kids. So don't let doubt come in. God's called you to this. And one last danger to beware of is hypocrisy. Remember, for us as Christians, it's the biblical foundation that we're looking at. We have a biblical foundation we're laying all this on. And these are your values, okay? These are the goals, and basically the goals need to be biblical, and they're coming from the values. What do you value? We talked about that a little bit earlier. And is it just having saved children? Is it just if you can get your kid to say a prayer, is that the end goal? Is it well-behaved kids? Because you got to think about what happens to well-behaved kids who are just trained to do all the right things in the right places. Or is it, good education? I mean, do you communicate that education is the only thing that brings success? Because there are scores of thoroughly educated people, and they are broken, and they are disillusioned. Okay, education isn't the end-all. It's possible to be well-educated, but you can still not understand life, right? So remember, your overarching goal here is that, you want to shape the character of your child. And so when you're dealing with hearts of kids, we don't want kids that are just putting on the outward show. We don't want to have kids who are well-trained sinners. That's hypocrisy. We want kids who love the Lord and who follow him. Hypocrisy can be a very, very easily thing that takes root in the heart of a family, even as well-intentioned as anyone here who wants their kids to love the Lord. I've known too much of that as well, where we just seen it's all in the outward, but the heart really never changed. The parents were always more concerned with how everything looked out in the public. What do people see them as? You got to guard against that. You don't want your kids just to be obedient and just to look good on the outside. That's why you're always addressing the heart. Don't let the heart go by ever. That is what you're addressing. So bring these things all kind of back. I just wanted you to remember that God has called you to educate your children. Then you have everything you need to do it. There are difficulties about it. There are dangers to be aware of, but none of these things should discourage you. I want to encourage you to continue on and continue to do things like this. This is fantastic. This is the first thing I've seen happen like this here in the UK. And so we're happy to give our numbers if there's things that we could help with. Again, we're not experts by any means. We're still doing it. But if there are resources that you need or ways that we can help and pass numbers with one another, listen, you need a support group. Because there's very few. We would go to conventions, there were thousands, and it kind of felt like, okay, we've got a good support group, but you need that. And so please, 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 make sure you've got people that you can check in with and that will keep you on track, because you guys are choosing a great, great thing, and the Lord will be honored by it. Can I pray, close in prayer? God, thank you so much for today. I thank you for the blessing of this time, and Lord, for the patience of these people, even with the young children having long days and us going longer than they expected. Lord, I thank you for them and pray that, Lord, this would be just a blessing to them. Lord, that it was helpful to them. I pray that you would encourage them and remind them, Lord, that you've called them to this, and if you've called them to this, that you will give them everything they need to continue faithfully, Lord, and that, Lord, you love them. And I pray that they would look at these little precious children as the harvest, Lord, that they need to know the Lord. They need to know you and be saved. And I pray that they would just constantly bring to bear, Lord, their sin, and Lord, that they would recognize their need for salvation, and that there would be a next generation, the children that will be sitting in this room doing the same thing, looking at planting seeds for shade trees for the next generation, Lord. So we just love you. We praise you for this time. Pray that you be honored in each of us. In Jesus' name, amen.